Today in our 2014 Ram 2500, we're going to be installing Firestone's Ride-Rite air helper springs. And this is what our airbags look like when they're installed. We do currently have our suspension hanging, so you can see them better. Once you're up in the air, it's going to be the same, they're going to be a little more compressed. These double convoluted airbags will offer up to 5,000 pounds of load carrying capacity. Now this doesn't increase the amount of capacity your vehicle can tow, just how much weight that it can assist supporting. What this really means for you is when you've got a heavy load on the vehicle, your back end is going to sag down. Well, these bags are going to help lift that back up, restoring your vehicle to its factory ride height. And this provides a lot of benefits for both you and your passengers. It's not only going to give you a smoother ride by giving you some extra dampening, cushioning support, but it's also going to help return your vehicle's ride height to its factory ride height when loaded down with a big heavy load. And this is really important because it's going to return your suspension to its factory geometry, which is going to help increase your tire wear, bringing it back to how it was. When your tires don't have the correct geometry, they can scrub down the road and cause excessive tire wear. Additionally, that offset in your geometry for your suspension can make your handling be a little less stable than what it was at your factory ride height. So it's going to make it feel better driving down the road, not only for your passengers, but for you as well, holding onto the steering wheel. And one more small benefit you're going to have is by bringing that back end up and lowering your front end back down. When you're driving at night, your headlights aren't going to be pointed up towards the sky, which doesn't really do a whole lot for you when it's pointed up. You get much better vision when it's pointed straight ahead of you. And that, along with the restored braking performance that you're going to get with a level ride, will make it for a safer ride for you and your passengers to get to your destination. Our customer is going to be using his airbags with his fifth wheel trailer. Fifth wheel trailers are typically much larger than any hitch-mounted trailer that you're going to haul, and that extra weight that's loaded down in the back of your suspension can really bring the back end down and drive the front up. These airbags are going to really help level it out and restore that driving performance that was lost due to that extra weight in the back. It's also going to be great for goosenecks as well. Now, if you often load the back of your truck up with a lot of weight, and sometimes that weight gets uneven, you have a heavier load on this side versus the objects that you have on this side. Well, each airbag has its own independent inflation valve, so you can air one side up more than the other to help level your vehicle out side to side. So what all this really means for you and your family going with you is that you're going to have a more comfortable, safer ride getting there. We'll begin our installation under the vehicle. I've removed the spare tire to make it easier for you to see, although it's not really necessary for the install. We're going to begin by removing the jounce bumpers on each side. Now, we're on a lift here. You can easily do this laying on your back. You will at some point need to put a jack underneath your rear hitch to help lift the vehicle up to make it easier to install some of the components. Let's get these out using a 15mm socket. Once both bolts are removed, we can set the jounce bumper aside and do the other side. We will not be reinstalling these. We'll now pre-assemble our airbags. You're going to have two different brackets for the top bracket like we have here, but they're both basically going to work exactly the same. They're going to have a different shape, but they're going to have two holes in them that'll allow it to slide over the studs, and they're going to have another hole that will slide around your air fitting. This is the driver's side here. I will say the passenger side, you have to put the bracket on first before you put your fitting in, and on your driver's side, you have to put the fitting in first before putting your bracket on. Those are the only real differences between the two. And then we're going to use a 1/2-inch wrench to tighten down this fitting. We want it to point towards the inside when we're done. I'm going to make sure that you get at least 1 or 2 threads of the sealant threaded down into the airbag. It does get pretty tight. Now we can set our bracket on top of our airbag and secure it with the flange nuts that come in the kit. We'll then tighten those down with a 15mm socket. You can then torque those to the specifications found in your instructions. We'll then place our lower airbag bracket onto the airbag and use the smaller flathead bolts to attach it to the bottom side. Now these ones we don't want to tighten down just yet, we just want it to hold it on there, so we're just going to tighten it down hand tight. Now we'll put our upper brackets in place where our jounce bumpers used to be. We're going to be using the longer flathead bolts that come in the kit, and you want to make sure that your bolts here, you can see that they're offset The shorter side will go towards the front of the vehicle, and the longer side here is going to go towards the back. We'll just pop it up there and thread the bolts in. We can then tighten those down using a 7/32 Allen key. And then once again, you can torque those to the specifications found in your instructions. We can then take our airbag, work it in. Now the bracket installed on the frame is going to slide into the upper bracket on our airbag. You can then take the long hex head bolts that come in the kit. You're going to slide it from the inside out through the brackets until it comes out the other side. On the other side, we're going to take the locking flange nuts, thread those on, and then we can tighten these down and torque them as well. We'll be using a 15mm socket and wrench to tighten those down. And then torque that hardware as well. Now that we've got our top bracket in place, our bottom bracket here is still loose, and we left it loose so we can ensure that we've got it in the correct orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and get it kind of lined up, and then mark the bag and mark the bracket. We want our notches to line up when we're done. So we're going to mark it here and here. Now we can take the same Allen socket that we used for our upper bracket to tighten down our lower bracket here to the bottom of our bag. You want to make sure that you keep those marks lined up and then snug it down. You can then torque it to the specifications found in your instructions. We'll now place the long carriage bolts down through our lower brackets. You'll have 2 square slots on each side. We want to use the ones closest to the center of the vehicle. Make sure that you avoid any wiring and hoses when pushing those down. We don't want to pinch anything. We're going to do the same on the other side. And now on the bottom, we can place our clamp bracket, slide the carriage bolts through the holes, and put a nut on the other side. We can then tighten them down with a 15mm deep well socket. Want to make sure you go back and forth, tightening it down evenly. And then you can torque those to the specifications found in your instructions. We'll use the exact same procedures to get our passenger side airbag installed. Now we can route our airline tubes from our airbags back to our air fittings. These air fittings here come in your kit, and the bracket can just be zip tied up wherever you'd like it. I've gone ahead and zip tied it to our hitch here to keep it up out of the way and also kind of keep it hidden. When routing your airline, you want to make sure you avoid any excessively hot objects such as your exhaust, and any moving objects like your steering and suspension components. Once you've got the hose where you want it, go ahead and cut it to length. You want to make sure that you cut it square so that way it seals properly. I recommend you use a pair of hose cutters like this, and then you just simply push it into the back of the quick connect fittings. I like to kind of push in and pull out to make sure that it's in all the way. The other end of your airline plugs into your airbags fittings in the exact same way. You simply push it in, make sure that it's fully seated. We'll now air them up and check for leaks. Now you want to spray all of your connection points and fittings to verify that there's no presence of bubbles. We're using soapy water, as soapy water will easily show bubbles if you have leaks. As you can see there's no bubbles. So now we're going to move on to our airbags and check the fittings there. There's no bubbles at our airbags either, so our installation is complete. We're ready to hook up our trailer and hit the road.